host, Nate Allball, head football coach of the Milford System Park Bearcats. Today, on the Quickscreen show, we're talking about coaching football. So yesterday was day one. You may have remembered a couple weeks ago I was talking about ideas, ways to get my kids motivated and lifting this off season. There were a handful of kids, 3 to 4, that are very big pieces of the puzzle for the future that weren't lifting. And so as coaches, we were just trying to figure out how could we get these kids lifting consistently and motivate them. And we came up with these 2 6-week segments, and we're going to motivate them using helmet decals. So if you want to know more about that, go ahead and search for that video where I talked about motivating the kids in the off season. But we started that yesterday, and we had a good turnout. We had the kids, those kids that we really needed, that were big pieces of the puzzle, were there, except for one. And of course, for now, we're worried about that one kid. But the bad news is that we seem to be getting another class where we're not getting anything out of this class. And by that, I mean, our current sophomore class is very, very good. And then the junior class, there's just only a couple kids. I think we'll probably only have about 5 seniors total next year. This year we only had 6. And then we'll have our juniors next year, which we'll have about 15, and that's a lot for us. And then now, these current freshmen, next year will be sophomores. It looks like we could quickly be down to about 5 of them, which leaves us with a decimated program outside of this junior class. So we desperately need, first of all, we desperately need a freshman class, a big freshman class. Thankfully, there are numbers there. Not necessarily football numbers yet. We've got to get them to play football. But there are numbers, meaning there's at least boys in that class. At the size school that we're at, we actually have classes come through where it'll be like there's only 12 boys total. So, it's another story as to how many of them are even athletic or have a desire to play sports. So this is actually at least a big class coming in. But we have to get big numbers out of this, and we're just struggling. It's tough. I know the coaches fight this everywhere. The good news with fighting these constant battles is that it's kind of another way you can separate yourself as a coach, because a lot of coaches, and I fight the temptation all the time, you want to just say, forget it. We're working so hard, we're pouring all this in, and the kids won't do it. And you get discouraged. All of us do. And I'm assuming you get discouraged as well. But that's kind of part of it. Like the guy that just says, I'm going to keep fighting this fight year after year after year, it's the same fight. Then you have to go fight it again. And we'll work our tail off with 3 or 4 guys trying to get them to play, and we'll get them to play, and you get to feel that sense of accomplishment for a little bit. And then next year it'll start again. So sometimes you wonder, you'll see a guy that retires at a fairly young age. He's like 45 and he retires from coaching, and maybe his teams are awesome. And you're going, I can't believe he retired. Well, you're thinking that unless you're already an older coach, and you're going, yeah, I know why. Because it's tiring. It's tiring to chase kids. It's like all we do. We chase kids. We get to draw up X's and O's, and that's fun. And go to coaching clinics, that's fun, and talk about football, that's fun. But the problem is there's a lot of work in there, and the work is chasing kids and dealing with problems and parents, and the list goes on and on. So that's what I'm dealing with right now. We got to chase more kids now because the numbers in our program are hurting. Even though we have one very talented class, the numbers everywhere else are hurting, and we've got to go out as a staff and try to make it better. Anyway, back to topic. We were talking about cover 2 from the 3-3 and kind of going to like a 3-3 monster. I showed it last week. So if you haven't seen last week's episode, go check out last week's episode. Showed you how we ended up from a 3-5 and why we may have wanted to go to some cover 2 type concepts. Now, my first forum poster last week kind of asked a real good question with motion, how we deal with that. And then my defensive coordinator and I, as we really talked about what we wanted to do next year, we started looking and exploring more problems that would be posed if we tried this 3-3 monster cover 2 type defense. So I'm going to go over some of those things with you, some of the problems we came up with, my D coordinator and I, and what that means for us for the future. So let's go ahead, we'll jump over the computer and check out some of those quote-unquote problems. Okay, so this is what we started with last week. We had the 3-3 stack. We talked about this Victor position, who used to be a free safety, but we named him Victor. We brought him down here to kind of play this 9 technique outside the tight end. Now we're real strong here against the wing T. We love this. My D coordinator and I, we love this because we had fits here last year. The problem is, as my first poster on the forum said, hey, what about when this guy comes in motion, coach? First thing we're going to try to do if you're in this is we'd like to shift and outnumber you over here because you're not necessarily strong over here. And he's absolutely right. We're not strong over there. And that immediately poses a problem. Because if he goes in motion at a decent speed, we'll never get Victor over there in time to really play, unless he goes over there and sets up and gives us a second to get set. But we know that's not going to happen. Our next options would be to come roll the coverage, maybe roll this corner down and roll this corner over, this monster back. We just don't want to do that. Other options would be kind of shifting the front, maybe slanting to it, bumping the linebackers, bumping the dog here, bumping our Mike, bumping this dog back. There are lots of options, but they all involve bumping and shifting, and not a lot that my D coordinator and I were crazy about doing. So we looked at some other problems. What about ace? We call this formation ace, 2 tight ends, 2 split ends. And what are we going to do now? Because we've got our interior 6, which we love. Okay, we've got our cover 2 shell. We love that, but we got this one guy. Well, what are we going to do with him? Okay, if this is the field side over here, I love having Victor here because now they've got to go at our extra guy. But what if they're in the middle? Where are we going to put Victor? We'd have to choose a side or, again, find a way to almost go into what? Well, a 3-4. Kind of put him here, let our dog come over here, and let the Mike come here and the dog come here. Well, that's just a 3-4. So our last problem was, and we see this a lot, we call this deuce, which is just your flex bone. And we call that deuce because we call this ace. Ace and deuce. They're very similar formations. But deuce gave us a problem too. Again, with deuce, we love deuce with this guy coming in motion at us. Or if Victor is to the field, we love it against deuce if Victor's always going to be to the field. But again, we get problems as to what if they're in the middle of the field. We're going to have to choose a side with Victor, or again, come into some variation of a 3-4. So after all this and exploring and looking at our options, my D coordinator and I thought of what we think would be the best thing for our team. And that is taking this formation with the Victor here and bringing our monsters in to like a 3x3, bringing our corners here to a 1x7, and bringing this Victor back here and renaming him FS for free safety. As you can see here, that's what we started off with in the first place. So after much deliberation, we think the best thing for our team is to not change and go to a cover 2 and deal with a whole new set of problems that we're unfamiliar with. And we'd have to have a whole new season of dealing with these little pieces of the puzzle we're not quite familiar with. And these things take time. They take seasons to figure out the wrinkles and the weaknesses of. And we don't want to do that. We've got a pretty decent thing going with our 3-5-3. We like it. We just have to find a way to get stronger against a couple little wrinkles or a couple little formations. And so that's where we're going to focus our attention. How do we get better at those little things instead of changing wholesale? So we're right back to square one. We're a 3-5 cover 3 team. I can go through some other things and some details in the future, but long story short, we think the best thing for our program is don't change. As much as we love the cover 2, we like the consistency that we've begun to create in our program more.
So that's it. You can see that, in my opinion, it's too many problems to really sell out and try to go with. At our level of football, where our kids are two-way players, we don't have that much time, we have to find a simple defense. A simple defense that doesn't have a whole lot of checks back and forth. If they do this, we do this. It has to be simple. And then the calling and the adjusting needs to be able to come from us as the coaches. And so you can see, after all that, and I spent many hours on the exploration of it, and so did my assistant, but we've decided that it's probably best for us to just stick with what we're doing, but instead of changing, just saying, hey, what specific things gave us problems last year, and how can we make small adjustments to those things to play them better this year. So that's what we've come up with. I think in conclusion, if you really want to play a cover 2 type shell from a 3-man front, you probably need to go to a 3-4. That would be my suggestion as a whole. That's all for this week, fellas. I thank you for joining me here on the Quickscreen Show once again. I'll see you next Tuesday, and next Tuesday we start a new book giveaway. So stay tuned and come join me next Tuesday. Until then, coach 'em up.